Back again for the benefit of anybody just joining us, Daryl Datta and Dick Hally, a couple of members of the Buckacre group with us this morning. And again, the reason we're talking to them basically is the fact that they'll be leaving the area rather soon after having been around here for some time. Be leaving us to cut a new album and hopefully to go on to bigger and better things than you've enjoyed so far.
Bigger and better things than the first album we hope for.
Well, now, for the benefit of people curious about what it takes to make an album and how you did it and how well it did for you, could you tell us about your cutting of the first album? Maybe before we do that, we should talk about Buckacre. How long has Buckacre been around as a group? Fill us in on that.
As a group, the name itself has been around for about 4.5 years. We started, well, 4.5 years would be
72, 73?
Yeah, it's about 73, yeah. The summer of 73. And the band has gone through a lot of changes since then. A lot of member changes and musical changes as well, you know, in terms of style.
You started out as what? Shall we say a rock and roll
bar,
group?
Yeah, a rock and roll bar band. Just a good time band, you know, just a bunch of friends together to have a good time.
Now you're essentially what? How do you classify Buckacre as a group? Can you draw a fine line and say I'm country or I'm rock or I'm...
It's hard. It's difficult. Like Daryl mentioned, he plays pedal steel and Alan uses fiddle, and we may even do some things in the studio. Hopefully, I'd like to have the chance to play a little bit of banjo, something not too complicated, but just to give a little banjo effect. So there are country influences in the instruments we play, but the songs, the way they're turning out, the new originals, I'd say it's leaning more towards rock and slightly away from country, but those country influences are still there. They'll be there, I think.
Okay. So Buckacre as a name has been around 4.5 years or so, but you musicians go back a couple of years beyond that, I'm sure.
Way back.
Even me.
Let's break here for another message, and when we come back from that, maybe we can have you tell us about the making of that album.
Okay.
That should be interesting. We'll be right back. Okay, the album that you made was recorded in England, the one that's currently available, right, on record shelves and things. Tell us about that. How did you get involved in the making of the album in the first place?
Well, we went to Florida out of boredom a long time ago.
Now let's see, which one is the comedian here? That's Dick Holly's
we're all crazy.
You gotta be.
You lose it on the road.
But we went down there. We were really getting nowhere here. Not anything against the area, you know, but it's really hard to really do anything around here. So we decided to go to Florida and see what would happen. You know, more or less as a vacation. We had our equipment with us, and the first job we played down there, we played for nothing, right?
Right. A keg of beer or something.
Yeah.
We got.
And then the second night we played for $50.
A case of Heinekens, I think we got for our first one.
Yeah, and we got asked, you know, to come back, and one thing led to another, and we picked up a manager, and they arranged a record showcasing, where for 6 nights, one record company a night would come in to see the band, you know, and...
How did you happen to pick up this manager that brought the record companies in to see you? This must have been a lucky find, more or less.
Well, he booked, actually at the time he was working at the University of South Florida in Tampa, and he booked the job that we played, and he wanted to sort of break away from that mold and get into managing more than being an agent. So he heard us, but he was sort of in the same position we were. He was new at managing as we were new at trying to evolve into a recording band. And so he had other connections, so he co-signed us with somebody else. It was sort of split managing sort of a situation. So he had 10% of us, and these other two people had 10% of us, and they had the connections with the record companies. So with all that combination, it worked out. But Rick Alter is his name, and he was just getting off the ground at the same time, and it would have been difficult for him to negotiate that sort of thing by himself.
Do you still have this gentleman as a manager?
Yes.
And he's in Florida, is that correct?
Mhm.
Yeah, he's from Tampa, Florida.
And you'll be going down there then to rehearse for this new album down in his area.
Right. Rehearse and play. It's going to be a pretty rough schedule because the time factor is becoming kind of tight. So we're going to do a lot of rehearsing during the day and playing at night. So it's going to be a pretty rigorous schedule.
You mentioned a few different classifications of groups, if you can classify them. I think, Daryl, you mentioned a bar band, and then you used the terminology a recording group. What essentially is the difference between the two? I mean, I might go out to a bar somewhere in the area or somewhere in the country or the world and say, gee, that's a great band. They probably don't have any recordings, but what is the difference between a bar band or a good bar band and a recording group?
Not so much between a bar band and a recording group, because some of the places you play when you're touring are still bars, so to speak, but they're
Showcase
exactly
bars, you know. I mean, it's where people don't go to get loaded and dance as much as to go and hear music.
There's not so much of a dance floor. The tables are set all around, and it's a concert situation, but it is for all practical purposes, it's a bar like the Roxy Theater in L.A. or the Bottom Line in New York or the Pick and Parlor in Nashville, where they're showcase clubs. But the difference between the transition that we had to make, although you do make a transition from whatever you are doing into recording, the transition that we had difficulty with was going from being a bar band into a concert band. There's a difference because everything becomes more visual. The people aren't just drinking and dancing and boogieing and all that. They are sitting and they're listening, and you have to have lights, have to be well structured, and you have to be visual as well. And then we had to make the transition back into being a bar band, and now it's to the point where we're going to have to make that same transition back into being a concert band.
So you're talking about, again, you're using the word visual. Instead of just playing, say, in a bar, providing dance music and maybe a tune or two for people who want to hear them, you went into this recording type or this concert situation where it is like showtime, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're putting on music for people to listen to and to watch you perform, and no dancing probably, right?
Right.
For the most, some people, although
a lot of times, you know, people can't help themselves.
They
Get a boogie beat,
Really,
get out there and do it. Huh?
Yeah, it's happened.
Well, good. We'll have to pause again for a message. We'll be right back and talk more with Daryl Datta and Dick Hally. Again, Buckacre is with us this morning, at least two members of the Buckacre group, Dick Hally and Daryl Datta. Daryl, you're from Ladd originally, right?
Right.
Ladd, Illinois.
Still.
Proud of it, I hope. Dick Hally, you're from where? What do you call home?
Well, Spring Valley I live now, but spent most of my childhood in Athens, Georgia, and was born in Boston, Mass.
Just a plain old reb, huh? Most
part of Yankee Reb Midwesterner. I don't know. I must have a strange-sounding voice.
Good mix. You made this one album that's still available, and probably some singles out there somewhere, still available too on some record shelves. What have you learned from the making of one album, and done a few concert dates here and there? What are the big things that you've come out of this with? What are you going to do different, if anything?
Okay. Well, I'll start off here and then let Daryl jump in. First of all, I think on the first album, people knew us basically from the bar band circuit as a lot of real high energy music. We played music designed to get people out of the seats, on the dance floor, having a good time. But basically that was other people's material. So what happened when we started writing our own material for the first album, we ended up writing songs that were somewhat mellower, maybe not quite as up-tempo or as rock and roll as people were used to hearing us. So those are the songs we ended up recording. Consequently, the album turned out somewhat mellower than the way we play live. At the same time, I think we were just sort of awed by we worked with an incredible producer, and we were in England, and the whole thing was just it just struck fear in you a little bit, and we just were intimidated by it all, and we just sort of let things happen in a way that possibly we wouldn't. I think the basic thing that we won't let happen this time is we'll be more assertive. We'll do things more the way that we want to do. We'll voice our opinion, and there'll be a lot of arguments and exchanges of ideas, but basically that'll be more constructive than just saying, well, this is one person saying this is the way it's going to be. And we didn't do as much playing on the album. The songs and everybody in the band, to the man, is very proud of the effort we did on the first album, but the second album has to be that much better. And I think our material's stronger, and it's more in line with what people will recognize us as doing. At the same time, we're not going to ignore the mellower or the ballad-type material, but we're not going to put the same emphasis on it that we did last time.
See, a lot of the songs were written before, well, obviously, before we did the album, and we had never played, a lot of the songs before we recorded them. So we didn't have any working arrangement at all. A lot of the songs were arranged in the studio.
Right.
That had to make it rough, I'm sure.
Right, with the help of Glenn Johns, who hadn't really ever heard us live, But, that's the way he heard the songs, and maybe the way the songs should have been done anyway, they were just a little bit...
For the style of songs they were.
Right. And they were good.
This next album that we're talking about, like you say, you haven't decided what's going to be on it yet, but it will be recorded sometime in February.
Well, we've got a good idea. We've got a selection of material. The way that was worked out, we had a meeting with our producer, a snowy weekend about 3 weekends ago, and we played in Joliet, and our producer flew in from Seattle, and I think that was a big part of it, was the fact that he's heard us live now. He sat there for 2 nights and listened to us, and he knows what we play like live. That didn't happen last time, so he knows what each, very perceptive guy, and he knows what each guy's capabilities are, what his vocal range is, what his playing abilities are. He heard the songs. We played him new songs that have been written, and we'll meet again in Florida, and from these 16 or 17 or 18 songs, we'll select 12 and record those 12, and then pick out 10 or 11 and put them on the album.
With that, maybe we should pause for another message. We'll be back and talk more with Dick Hally and Darrell Data. Our guests on the Coffee Club this morning, members of Buckacre, a name that many people recognize and
strikes
music
fear
they
in the
enjoy.
hearts of people.
Let's hope that the new album comes out and you do real well with it. Daryl, some of your thoughts on what you're going to have to do and what you're doing, maybe from a personal standpoint or as a group standpoint, what changes in attitudes or...
Well, the attitude that I went in with for the last album anyway, as far as vocally, which is what I contribute most, to the band, is I thought it would be really nice to go in and sing a song, somewhat straight, and then change it a little bit as I went along. Now I'm thinking maybe I should experiment a little bit more with what I'm going to be singing before I go in there, So I'm happy with what I did to a certain extent, but it could have been done a lot better.
It isn't a matter then of just taking the songs that the audiences receive well and putting them on tape.
No,
or is
not
it?
at all.
It is not.
You base some of it on audience reaction, of course. I mean, some of the tunes that we're considering recording, we've been playing for 4 or 5 or 6 months, and you gauge audience reaction as to, well, that tune must have really something going for it because it gets a good reaction, or this tune doesn't get much reaction. It means something.
This album will be on the MCA label?
MCA, yeah. This is our, well, this completes the contract called for 2 albums, and we'll complete the 2-album contract, and after that, it'll be, see what happens.
Being quite candid about the whole thing, I get the impression that you had anticipated a bit more from the first album. Maybe not locally, but nationally. You were a little disappointed, weren't you?
We got...
overall turnout.
I'll tell you,
the
thing about it is that maybe a lot of people aren't aware of, that could point out, sales of the album were much less than we idealistically hoped for. But we occasionally saw status sheets on airplay, and we were getting very good amounts of airplay. Not particularly AM, which would be top 40 stations. We didn't do well there. But we got a lot of extensive FM airplay almost all over the country, from L.A. to San Francisco, New York, Boston, Dallas. Some towns we did particularly well in. One of our singles, Love Never Lasts Forever, charted in Nashville, and we had some action in Dallas. And, I mean, it's not as negative as it seems. It's just that the sales weren't up to the airplay level we got. We're hoping for little bit more addition.
In some of the reviews of your group, I can recall somebody sort of describing you as an Eagles-type organization. Is it good that you're described like some other group, or should they say Buckacre, totally unlike anything I've ever seen or heard before?
Well,
what are you shooting for? Anything totally different in any respect?
I think basically our own sound, which is, you know, I mean, people always classify, you know, music. I mean, well, classical, country, and it's really hard, you know, like these days anyway. There's so many different kind of rock and roll bands, you know. There's real hard rock and roll, and there's light, easy listening rock and roll, you know, and it's people just look for a way to describe you. It's not, I don't think anybody ever compared us to the Eagles, you know, but it was just more or less a way to let people know what they're getting, you know, if they buy the product.
It seems like it's almost a necessary reference. The Eagles, when they came out and were, say, 4 or 5 years ago in the position that we are now, get compared to the Byrds or Crosby, Stills, and Nash, because they're at that point then. So it's to let people know who have no idea what the music is like, well, hey, it's sort of like the Eagles, it's sort of like Firefall. It's just a point of reference.
After you make this new album, after it's released, you probably will be doing then concert dates, backing this thing up and promoting it around the country, right?
Or like the last time that the album, or the first album was released, we did a nationwide promotional tour, which consisted of concerts and showcase clubs, like the Roxy, the Pick and Parlor, the Bottom Line, you know, places like that.
So you're ready for this kind of thing again, should it be...
more than.
On the dotted line.
Psychologically, anyway, physically, we'll have to get it back together some. This
time it's going to work, 100% or better, huh? I mean,
well, I'll tell you,
the second time around, and we're really going to make this thing move this time.
There's been some things we could get into that have happened to the record company that we're with. I feel that we're in a good position with MCA, and although everything at this point is speculation. But when you think about MCA's one good, solid rock and roll band was Leonard Skinner, who's no longer. Mm-hmm. So they need to develop somebody. Elton John has retired. For all practical purposes, he's going to record some, but he's not going to tour as much. So Elton John is not there as much. Skinner's not there. MCA needs to break an act in the field that we're in. So it sort of puts us in a good position. Also, we're not going to rely strictly, as we did last time, on the promotional staff that MCA has. We're going to bring in independent promotion people. So a lot of markets, major markets, any one, for example, on the West Coast, or a Dallas, or a Pittsburgh, or a Nashville, a place where you can break a record out of, are going to have people from MCA's promotional staff hitting the record stations, plus independent people, which are going to be hired by people who own our production company. So that there's a lot of positive aspects this time.
All right, we'll have to break again for a message. We'll be back and talk more with Dick Hally and Darrell Data of Buckacre. We're talking about taking a local or area and semi-name national group from LaSalle and Peru and Spring Valley. I should probably start out the other way around. Spring Valley and Ladd, and then LaSalle.
We include the whole area, though.
Taking you people from this area and throwing you out to national acclaim.
To the Wolves. Harmony.
Wolves. How do you? What goes through one's head when you go from LaSalle, Peru, and Ladd and Spring Valley in this area out to Miami or New York or Los Angeles or Dallas somewhere? What happens to people? Anything big goes through your mind? You say, "Hey, we have arrived," or
it's a lot of excitement. You know?
Do you become a different person at all, or are you still the same people?
Well, you're still basically the same people. You're a little bit more aggressive, I think.
Yeah, we finally destroyed a motel room, which we'd always read about other people doing, so we thought we'd try it. Down in Missouri, we decided, well, everybody else has done it. Let's destroy a motel room. So
did you get sufficient amounts of publicity from that?
No, there's a lot of personal satisfaction and release of tension.
One MCA rep there with a camera, that's about it.
You probably alerted the owner that you're doing it for publicity
we
purposes.
Fixed it all back up. We're handy people too. So.
Super glue.
So, when you go out then, you're basically the same people as we know in this area, only a little more aggressive, and I suppose you have to keep in mind the fact that you're representing not only yourselves, but MCA, and you can't do anything wrong because it may reflect back upon you. And
we're a pretty well-behaved band.
I didn't mean to
say.
imply that you weren't.
No, but I, you know.
Well, I don't remember you behaving all.
We have about a minute remaining in this program. I've done an awful lot of asking you questions. Anything that we haven't covered that maybe you gentlemen would like to say in winding this up?
Sure. How's your
Dick,
group doing?
We'll have to do another program and talk about the newfound fun group.
Okay.
We'll plug in there.
Okay. With that, then, if we have nothing more to say, we'd like to...
we'll say one more little thing. It was amazing. I know everybody felt it. Things that are sort of at a different period now, and it's been like a year and a half since our first album came out, and everybody in the area, the response that happened to us all made us all feel very good. The way we got tremendous backing from people in the area, and I think they felt proud in a way to be part of it, and we want them to be part of it because they are, and we just want to extend our thanks and hope that they do the same thing when we come out again in the spring.
Oh, from my end of it, being involved in the radio business, having played your music, I'd say it's very good music and very well done. I'm proud of it,
thank
too.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Best of luck to you on your new record, and hope to be reading more about Buckacre in months to come. That's it.
Thanks for grabbing some coffee with you.
Okay. Well, thank you so very much, and again, a pleasant good morning. Our topic this morning is Buckacre. We'd like to welcome back to our microphones a gentleman that has been on this program.
Gentleman?
Well, there's a guy that walked in the studio.
So my reputation hasn't preceded me.
Dick Hally of Buckacre is with us this morning, and Buckacre, or at least part of the group, is back in the area, and whenever they do come back into the area, we give them a call, or like to at least contact them somehow and see if we can't talk to them on radio. Dick, this is a Friday now, the 4th of August, if my calendar is reading correctly. What's happening with Buckacre? Where are you? What are you doing? And
Well, we just got back from about a 2.5 week swing down through the southeast. We did a few concerts and some club dates in Florida and South Georgia, and we just got back Saturday, and some of the people that our piano player who lives down in Sarasota and our road crew, who also from the same area, are down there and probably on the road right now on their way up, because we'll play tomorrow the Chicago Fest at Navy Pier. So we've been off for 4 or 5 days, and we're just kind of hanging out around the area.
you have recently recorded an album, and we do have some music from that we'd like to be playing during this program. Maybe you should fill us in, Dick, once again, for the benefit of maybe some of our listeners who say Buckacre. I think I know who they are, but I haven't seen them perform. Who is Buckacre?
Well, I'm not even sure. No. Buckacre is, it's a band that I'm part of.
Right.
We play, we record for MCA, and we're, like you say, we just finished our second album, and I'm not sure how to answer that.
Actually, I should have introduced you. I should say, here is Dick Hally of Buckacre, nationally recognized recording artist
in some
for
areas
MCA,
nationally.
for MCA Records. And well, let's start the program over. No, not really starting it over, but you have released an album recently, and again, you're back in the area. How many guys in the group? Let's just go very basic.
5 people.
And what do you have in the way of instrumentation?
Okay, we've got, I play bass guitar. Dick Verucki does, is the drummer for the band. Alan Thacker plays guitar and fiddle. Daryl Datta plays rhythm guitar and pedal steel. And David Anson from Sarasota, Florida, does keyboards and synthesizer.
Now, we'll be listening to some of your music probably pretty quick now. But if you were to describe the kind of music that you have on this album generally, and the kind of music that you like to provide, and for what kind of an audience, what would you say? What are you doing?
Well, from the difference being from the first album was a bit mellower. We punched up the second album. It's got more energy to it. It's basically, like anything, I think any artist would find it difficult to classify what they do, but I would say and probably the other people in the group would say. It's basically rock and roll with a touch of country on the side. We use some country instrumentation, such as a fiddle, pedal steel guitar, and I even dabbled on a little banjo on the album. But usually the beats, the rhythm sections are pretty much rock and roll. So it's basically a rock and roll with a touch of country on the side.
What audience, age group, or well, you mentioned the kind of music, rock and roll combined with the country, that kind of thing. Is there a particular age group or type of person you're going after?
I would say basically as many people as we could get between 14, 35.
Okay.
It can fit right in there to a lot of people.
Well, let's pause here, Dick, and we'll come back, and when we do, maybe we can play a cut from the album.
Okay.
So stay with us. We'll be right back. Well, for the benefit of anybody that might just be joining us, we're talking about Buckacre, the exciting music group from the area that has just released its second album. Dick Hally is with us, Buckacre. What are we about to hear, Dick?
Well, this is a song called Tear Down the Walls. It was written by Alan Thacker and myself, and it's a cut that it's the flip side of our first single, but a lot of the reaction we've been getting from MCA promotion people in the field and program directors at FM stations, this is the song that a lot of them are picking up on and playing. So I thought that might be the first one to go for.
Okay. It's
getting a real good reaction on this one.
Tear Down the Walls. Here we go with that song. Stay with us.
Okay, wait a minute.
And there we have it, Tear Down the Walls, Buckacre. Dick Hally, any comments on that, the way the thing came out, engineering-wise, or some surprises you had in the total sound that came out after you cut this particular?
The engineering is real good on the album, and the way the pressing and the mastering all turned out real good. It comes out very bright sounding, which is a real good indication. I think depending on who you talk to within the band, they have different criticisms about the way things are mixed, but I think that's pretty common to do that. You know, you feel like, well, this should be a little bit louder here. Possibly some of the vocals should have been mixed up a little bit more, I think, and guitar parts in a few spots should have been a little bit louder, and the bass in a few songs should be up a little bit more. But you'd get a different reaction on that depending on who you talk to. But the mix isn't exactly what we had in mind, but
we were just chatting during the playing of that record. We were talking behind the scenes, of course, and I think I had commented that in comparing this album with the first album that you released, I much prefer the second one because it's a little brighter sounding, a little more lively. The sound is a little more fresh, I think, a little brighter in the way of the mix that you're talking about there. And so if people like Buckacre and like the first album, I think they should as well like this one.
That's unusual, though, because generally I get the same reaction, and I think the people in the band generally get the same reaction, but I have had people tell me they prefer the first one much more than this one, although generally I think a lot of people do go for this one more. It's more indicative of what the band sounds like. There's more energy on the album. There's more songs in the up area rather than ballad-type songs, but
well, this is a thing that I recall you or someone with your organization having said, that the first album maybe was a little more on the calm side, quieter than what you would really be in concert, and this second album you hoped would be more like what you really are.
It is closer, although I think the only way to really capture any real band is to just out and out set up microphones and record them live. Especially that would be indicative of our band, would just to record a live album, although as obscure as we still are, not really knowing what kind of demand there would be for a live album other than people that have heard us.
Well, now, when you go out to do shows and concerts, are there people that ever come up and say, gee, you don't quite sound like what I heard on the album? Do you have any problems that way?
We did some after the first album, not near as much now, because the way we're playing now, most of the songs we're doing 9 of them off of this album. We're doing 8 off of the first album. And some of the arrangements of the songs on the first album we've redone just for our own sake, to keep it interesting, like a song like Love Never Lasts Forever, which is a very acoustic-oriented kind of middle-of-the-road country rock type song. We've punched up. Les is not with the band anymore, who sang the lead on that song, and we've got Dave, our keyboard player, singing that. And it's a real dynamic arrangement where it starts off with just piano and Dave's vocal, and it comes up into an entire band track and then breaks back down into the piano. And we rearranged that song, Bound to Be Blue. But the songs on the second album that we're doing them very, very close to the way they are recorded. The playing is where it is, and the lengths are fairly similar, so we don't get that comparison as much anymore.
That's good, because I've read that some acts can go out successfully and do concerts, and the people are pleased with what they hear live and on record, but yet some other acts just can't quite cut it, going out doing live shows, because all of this mixing and whatnot in the studios has made them sound so great, and then they get out on stage and they look like a bad weed or something.
Yeah, and some of them, I think some people end up using studio people, and then if you don't put the right touring band together when you go out on the road, then you don't get the same sound, or maybe the people are of lesser ability. But with a group like ours, of course we don't play the way session players do. It wouldn't be near as well if we took session players and put them on here and worked up arrangements to each of these songs. It would come off as stronger instrumentally, but we're a group, and we prefer to play. The only thing we didn't do on this album was the saxophone solo on one song. We did everything else, vocally and instrumentally.
That sounds great. Let's again pause. We'll be right back and talk more with Dick Hally of Buckacre. Back again, and Dick, life as a professional musician, entertainer,
I wouldn't know.
Aspiring to success, national recognition, worldly recognition, money, fame, fortune, all the good things that showbiz can offer, be so fortunate. Sometimes they're not too easy to come by. You've had experience. You've released singles and album number 1. Now we have album number 2 and singles. How does it look at this point? Now, you mentioned to me that you'd like to speak to what the situation is with Buckacre and some of your successes and frustrations and almost made it's maybe and that kind of thing.
Well, there's a definite feeling of pride and accomplishment for what we have done. We've gotten to do, at this point, 2 albums. Some people are in the music business and never, ever get that opportunity, so we have that. We've got to travel extensively across the country several times and back and forth to the Southeast numerous times. And like I say, we feel very fortunate about a lot of things we've gotten to do. It's a competitive business, and to try to really crack a single, something like that, can be really difficult, and it has been for us. The promotion from the record company is minimal at this point from MCA. They're spending, I think, less money promotionally on this one than they did on the first. They don't have, when we came out with our first album, there were posters and buttons and T-shirts and that sort of thing that they had made up, at least some, and were distributing, and they haven't done anything like that. And at this point, we're still sort of negotiating, trying to work out a working relationship with a manager. We're not represented at this time, and we're talking to some people in Nashville that represent groups like Charlie Daniels and Wet Willie and some of those people for management. And I think the record company's a little reluctant, or they are reluctant at this point, to spend money promotionally because they feel like our organization is slightly in chaos. And we've also done some talking with other labels. I think our third album, when the group gets ready to do a third album, I doubt very much if it'll be on MCA.
Do you feel, Dick, that now that you've done 2 albums and have released some singles, that the door will open easier if you want to go to another label, or say when you want to get another manager? Do you think it will be much easier for you to walk in and say, here's some stuff we have done, and here's where we have been, and we want you to take us beyond this point, rather than, having had this experience, rather than say somebody cold walking in and say, hey, I got a great group, give me a listen?
Well, there's no doubt that at least we can give somebody a product and say, well, this is what we have done, and you can see the growth from the first album to the second album. And if you listen to both of our albums and you saw us live, then you'd get a good idea where the band is at. And I believe that would be a fair statement to say, yeah.
Dick, what's it going to take? Some money to get the job done?
It takes a lot of money. takes a lot of money. You have to have constant investment. I mean, the amount of money that we've spent just on recording the 2 albums and the support that you need when you're not making enough money on the road, it hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's amazing. It just takes a huge investment to really do it.
Well, who could you get to cough up $500,000 or so to put you back where you want to get going?
Somebody who believes in you.
Here we are, sort of changed our mood in this thing. You are at a transition type point, you say here.
Oh, yeah.
The best way to describe it.
Definitely.
You're looking for a new manager. The record company, you have released this album and some singles.
Well, we were contracted for 2 albums with MCA, and this is the second album. Now, if for some reason, if we did renegotiate with MCA, I think we would almost certainly renegotiate with a contract that had stipulations. I mean, figures, considering promotion.
Guaranteed this?
This much money
Great.
would have to be spent.
Uh-huh.
So then you can see, well, the contract's valid or it's not valid. You're not fulfilling it or you are fulfilling it.
It protects your interests, too. If you're going to tie up time, money, and so forth in producing the record, then you're going to make sure it's going to be sold, or at least they'll try to sell it.
We're not in a boat alone. I mean, you could go to any huge record store and find hundreds of albums similar to ours that are really good quality, but nobody really knows who they are, and it becomes kind of frustrating to put in that much time and energy, months and months and months, into the writing and arranging and recording to do it. And when you don't see the result, you get frustrated.
All right. We'll have to break here once again. We'll be right back and talk more with Dick Hally of Buckacre. Back again. Buckacre is our topic, and again our guest, Dick Hally. Dick, MCA, the record company that you've had your records with, your singles and your albums, I understand has undergone some stress and strain of late. Do you want to elaborate on that?
Well, they've gone through a lot of growth changes in the last few years. A real good friend of ours in Nashville, the head publicity man down there, just lost his job, and they're always going through changes. A lot of people we knew with MCA have moved on to different companies. A few of them are with ABC now, ABC Records and Polydor. People like that. They are going through a lot of changes within the company, so that's caused some problems too. And they are having some problems with their artists. I mean, of course, the famous lawsuit that Olivia put on them. But she'll never have a prayer winning that, because that would give every artist a precedent to sue for promotion. And so,
what essentially was the story on this again?
Well, they just, I guess Olivia's management and lawyers thought that MCA couldn't break a record for her, so they sued for some vast amount of money, something like that. But it wasn't. At this point, at least, it hasn't been. The ruling was against her rather than for, because it would give every artist in the world could just say, "Well, they didn't break my record, so I'm going to sue." So it hasn't gone through. That would have been wild if it did, but.
Okay, we're going to have to ask you. Buckacre will be appearing in
Saturday at the Chicago Fest. We'll be there in the afternoon, I think, from like 2 to 4. And then next week we're going to be out in Des Moines, Iowa for 3 days, and up in Minneapolis for 3 days. And then we're coming back and do some dates around Bloomington, Peoria, Springfield, some things like that, probably through Labor Day.
Okay, Dick, we have another cut. We'd like to listen to a portion of that at least to sort of wind down the program. We'd like to wish you and all the other members of Buckacre, fans and so forth, a lot of luck in the selling of this album and whatever you do in the future.
Well, thank you.
Now, the record?
This is Night Driver, written by 2 friends of ours, Skip Caparis and Bob Wilson.
Okay, if you'd like to push that little button there, away goes the music.